Hey boils and ghouls, welcome back to the 13th hour. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but Dark Castle Entertainment actually announced around August last year that they were looking into doing a TV series based on the 13 Ghost movie. And this TV series was supposed to have each episode dedicated to one of the 13 ghosts and what their backstory was. I thought that sounded great, like a TV show I would definitely binge watch. Really hope that they do go through with this. If you know any recent or updated news on that story, let me know below because I think that sounds amazing. But it got me thinking that maybe we could jump the gun a little bit. Maybe we could do a deep dive into each of the 13 ghosts' backstory and grisly deaths before they have a chance to do it. So without ado, let's get spooky.
Wait, no! What are you doing? What did I just say? Did I just say there's a petting zoo downstairs? No! There are ghosts downstairs, Arthur!
Now a cult classic. The 13 Ghosts movie is a story following the Critwickers family, who inherit their Uncle Cyrus's estate. However, something more sinister awaits them inside. 13 ghosts filled with rage and the desire to get revenge on the living for their grisly deaths. The interior of the house is filled with moving glass panels, each glass panel etched with an ancient spell designed to create an ever-changing labyrinth to keep the ghosts from ever escaping. Each ghost in the movie has an origin story accompanied with their own looks, personality, and kill style. And each ghost is trapped in this house for a reason. Cyrus is a ghost hunter and creator of the bazilus machine, which is basically the mechanical parts that move inside of the house. But he had masterminded this machine to use the ghosts of the Black Zodiac to open the Eye of Hell and grant Cyrus demonic and powerful abilities. 13 earthbound souls, 12 which represent each sign of the Black Zodiac, are fed to the machine's core, powering it and opening the Eye of Hell. All ghosts trapped here are connected through their tragic pasts and deaths, dying in a specific way that meets the sadistic requirements for the bazilus machine to work fully. So let's take a deeper look into each of the ghosts' tragic death and pasts. So we'll start off with the firstborn son, aka Billy Michaels. Billy Michaels was a young child, maybe around the age of 10 or 11, and he had a huge love for old Western movies. His most favourite thing to do was to play cowboys, and anyone who tried to get Billy to stop playing would be met with aggression and anger. One day, a neighbouring child challenged Billy to a duel, to which Billy would not back down from. Billy, with his plastic gun, had no idea that the other child came bearing with a real steel-tipped arrow. Well, until it was shot through the back of his skull anyway. Billy died there and then playing his favourite game. He was then captured by Cyrus and taken to the glass mansion. The ghostly child is seen using a tomahawk as his weapon of choice. And although he does not seem like he wants to kill, he certainly has no issue scaring people into the arms of more violent spirits. If ever you hear, "Let's play," you can be sure Billy Michaels is in your presence. The next ghost we're going to look at is the Jackal. And for me, the Jackal is easily the most terrifying out of all 13 ghosts. From their looks, you may not believe that they were once human. Instead, born from a demonic force. But he was. The Jackal was born Ryan Khan in 1887, and he grew up to be a sick and twisted man. He had an unnaturally horrifying lust for women, and would spend his evenings hunting down vulnerable women, runaways and prostitutes, doing unspeakable things to them. Ryan clearly at some point had a tiny piece of humanity left within him, as he went to seek help for these horrible acts he was committing, and he was sent to Boringwood Asylum. In the asylum, he would try to claw his way out so violently all of his fingernails were ripped from their beds. As he completely lost his mind, he managed to keep his aggressive nature, attacking multiple nurses when they entered the room. Doctors did what they could and put him in a straitjacket, but this was not enough to stop Ryan. He gnawed his way through the jacket, leading the doctors to next place his head in a medieval-looking cage. This was to prevent him from getting completely free and attacking anybody else. One day, a huge fire broke out in the asylum, and Ryan chose not to leave. He wanted to die, and so allowed the flames to engulf his body. You'll know the Jackal is approaching because you'll hear whispered screams and manic laughing. Next up, we have the Torso, aka Jimmy Gambino. Jimmy Gambino was a man with crippling gambling addiction. Gambino eventually became his own bookie, running his own business. But he was in a field he should not have been. Still unable to stop gambling and not able to say no to a bet, he caught the eye of a mobster, Larry Finger Fatilo. Larry challenged Jimmy to a bet where he knew he couldn't say no. They both placed their bets on a fighter in a boxing match, and, of course, Jimmy lost. Unable to pay out the winnings to Larry, Larry one night sent his gang to come find Jimmy and collect their boss's winnings. And when they realized Jimmy was broke, they broke Jimmy instead, cutting his body into pieces and wrapping him in cellophane, dumping him into the ocean. Jimmy's ghost seems pretty harmless. He's not really known to attack and just seems to wander around the house. But I suppose it is pretty hard to attack anyone with no head. Now we have the Bound Woman. So the Bound Woman, or when she was living, was known as Susan Legros. And Susan had nothing to complain about. Her family were the richest in town, and she was loved and super popular at school, even becoming a head cheerleader. And of course, as the stereotype goes, the prettiest cheerleader must be with the captain of the football squad. And she was. She dated the head footballer, Chet Halters. On the night of prom, Susan was clearly a little bored with Chet and decided to be a little bit naughty. Chet found Susan with another boy, which drove him mad. Chet clubbed the other boy to death and with his tie, strangled Susan, breaking her neck in the process. He then buried her body on the football pitch under the 50-yard line. And now we have the Hammer. And the Hammer may be one of the most tragic stories out of all the ghosts we have. The Hammer, aka George Markley, was not a bad person. He was honest and hardworking, and he took the position of a blacksmith. One day, a racist called Nathan decided to wrongly accuse George of being a thief. Nathan told George to leave town, but he did not. George knew his innocence and stood up for himself. Nathan and his gang of racists decided to send George a message. They brutally murdered his wife and 2 kids. George, blinded by fury, chased Nathan down and killed him with a sledgehammer. But the townsfolk, not knowing the entire story, and probably just wanting any excuse to rid their home of any blacks, took it upon themselves to find George and tie his body to a tree, ramming railroad spikes into his body until he died. Now we have the Withered Lover. The Withered Lover, aka Jean Criticus, was the loving wife of Arthur and the mother of their children Bobby and Kathy. Jean died due to a house fire that the rest of her family survived. She one night fell asleep peacefully in front of a fireplace when a log had managed to get loose and set their home ablaze. Suffering intense burns and her lungs full of smoke, she was taken straight to St. Luke's Hospital, where she eventually passed on. Now, Jean does not want to cause any harm to her family. Even after death, she's fully aware of who she was before, and she actually tries to help them as much as possible throughout the movie. Next up, we have the Angry Princess. So the Angry Princess, aka Dana Newman, was said to be a beautiful woman, and Cyrus even mentioned that she was supposed to have the natural looks of a goddess. Sadly, this was not something Dana could see in herself, developing body dysmorphia and believing her body was covered with nothing but imperfections. Her mental health issues had been seasoned with a multitude of abusive boyfriends who all fed the disease, making it worse and worse. This drove Dana into getting surgeries, and as many as she could, including nose jobs, breast implants, and fillers. Doctors soon enough refused to assist in any more surgeries, as they could tell there was something more sinister going on. Dana was never going to stop, and they were not going to be responsible for her death. So late one night in the clinic where she worked, Dana Newman decided to operate on herself. This left her blind in one eye and even more depressed than ever. The angry princess eventually gave up on trying to attain this ridiculous standard of beauty, and taking a butcher's knife into the bath, she slashed her body until she bled out completely. This same butcher's knife is the angry princess's weapon of choice as she haunts the rooms of the house. Now let's take a look at the Torn Prince. So the Torn Prince, also known as Royce Clayton, was born in the 1940s and became a high school baseball star in the late 1950s. In true 1950s fashion, one day Clayton was challenged by a greaser to a drag race, but this greaser was not ready to play fair, and he cut the brakes on Royce's car before the race even began. Royce, wanting to win, kept going faster and faster, and when it finally came time to stop, the car did not. He lost complete control of it. The car spun, flipped, and smashed up against the walls, resulting in large amounts of flesh being ripped from Royce's body and ending his life. As the star of his baseball team, Royce Clayton's choice of weapon is his trusted bat. Next, we have one of the most dangerous ghosts out of all of them, the Juggernaut. Juggernaut, also known as Horace Breaker Mahoney, was abandoned as a child. He grew insanely fast into a huge man, towering over absolutely everybody. And because of this, he was bullied relentlessly at school and always ended up being the outcast. From years of working in the junkyard, he became as strong as an ox. Horace eventually went insane and became a notorious serial killer, picking up hitchhikers and people whose cars had broken down. He would offer them a ride, but instead take them back to his junkyard, where he would rip them apart with his bare hands. But one day, Horace would pick up the wrong hitchhiker. This guy was actually a part of an undercover SWAT team looking for Horace. And when Horace took the undercover back to his junkyard and attempted to murder him, the rest of the SWAT team emerged and shot Horace dead. Next, we have the Pilgrimess. So the Pilgrimess, aka Isabella Smith, was a victim of the Salem witch trials, which spread like a disease around the New England area in the late 1600s into the 1700s. And these Salem witch trials killed many innocent women of the time. Isabella travelled to New England in hopes of a better life. However, no pre-established townfolk were willing to accept an outsider who had not originally travelled with their town. The livestock of these towns one day began to go missing mysteriously, and the townsfolk, believing this to be the work of the devil and witchcraft, looked to Isabella as she was the only thing new and different. They accused her of witchcraft and attempted to burn her alive. They chased her into a barn and set it on fire. Miraculously, Isabella came out unharmed. But unfortunately, this did not look good for her case. And so the townsfolk dragged her into town and put her in the stock, where the children and men would spend their evenings shouting insults and curses and stoning her. But this didn't kill Isabella. Isabella eventually died from starvation a few weeks into her torture. Lastly on our list, we have a duo, the Dire Mother and the Great Child. The Great Child and the Dire Mother are among the most creepiest of the 13 ghosts. Margaret Shelburne was a woman with dwarfism who worked in a carnival show of freaks. And one night, whilst cleaning out the donkey pen, she was attacked by the tall man of the freak trope. This resulted in her becoming pregnant, and Margaret gave birth to Harold, who grew to an enormous size. Margaret mothered Harold far too much, keeping him as much of a baby as possible. She never allowed him to grow out of his diapers, keeping him in them even as a large child. One night, as a cruel joke, the other freaks shoved Margaret into a sack where she suffocated and died. This drove Harold to insanity, and with an axe, he went and killed as many of the freaks as he could. He would then put their chopped up remains on display for all paying customers to see. The ringleader found out what Harold had done and ordered a mob to kill Harold. They followed orders and ended his life. And there we have it, you guys, the backstory of all 13 ghosts. Let me know who your favourite ghost is and which one you would hate to come up against the most. And if you have not done so already, be sure to devote your soul to me by subscribing to the channel and liking this video. And I'll see you in the darkness. Bye guys. Bye.